So, this morning I want to talk about recovering your life with guidance. I don't know if you've noticed, but I've used that phrase the last couple of Sundays that I've done messages. Recovering your life. We talked about recovering your life with the rhythm of rest and prayer and just recovering your life. And this is about with guidance. Everyone has a need for a guide in life to help us through the unknowns. That guide is Jesus. We get guidance from him through the Spirit and the Scriptures, but we hear God's voice and understand the Scriptures best in community. We all need guidance as we walk through life. John chapter 16, verses 13 through 15. This is from the Message Bible. I still have many things to tell you, but you can't handle them now. But when the friend comes, the Spirit of the truth, he will take you by the hand and guide you into all the truth there is. He won't draw attention to himself, but will make sense out of what is about to happen, and indeed, out of all that I have done and said. He will honor me, he will take from me and deliver it to you. Everything the Father has is also mine. This is why I've said, he takes from me and delivers to you. So, let me tell you one of the greatest stories that I have ever heard. It's about this young teenager by the name of Daniel. Daniel is from New Jersey. Daniel is going through a trial in his life right now because Daniel just lost his father. So Daniel's mother decides to move her and her son from Jersey to sunny California. Now Daniel was very reluctant on the move. He was like, man, I gotta find new friends, new home, new school. But Daniel did move to California and he became friends with one of his neighbors. And one of his neighbors invited him to one of the beach parties, which is very famous in California. And so they go to this party, and while he's at the beach party, he sees this young lady by the name of Allie. And when he sees Allie, he's like, man, she's beautiful. And love at first sight, Daniel was so eager to ask Allie out on a date. The only problem was that Allie was in a bad breakup with her ex-boyfriend by the name of John. So we got Daniel and Johnny right there, right? And then we got Allie. So that didn't stop Daniel. Daniel continues to pursue Allie, but in his pursuit of Allie, there was tension between Johnny and Daniel. And this tension regularly led to physical altercations. In these physical altercations, Daniel would always get the worst of it. When he was in an altercation with Johnny, and the reason was he would get the worst of the altercation is because Johnny was an expert in karate. He had a black belt in karate, but Daniel would sometimes try to stand up for himself, but it never worked out in his favor. And as a matter of fact, it was one time in the altercation that Daniel, he was going to be seriously injured. There was no doubt. Though lo and behold, there was a maintenance man by the name of Mr. Miyagi. And he was watching the whole thing, and when Mr. Miyagi saw what was going on with Daniel, he immediately came to defend and rescue Daniel. This night where Daniel was rescued by Mr. Miyagi gave Daniel so much hope, because you must see, Mr. Miyagi was also a karate expert as well. So Daniel asked the obvious question, Mr. Miyagi, can you teach me so I can defend myself against Johnny? And Mr. Miyagi agreed. So he started teaching Daniel karate. Daniel had so much excitement, but quickly that excitement turned into disappointment. And the reason why it turned into disappointment because Mr. Miyagi had a unique way of teaching Daniel. Daniel's karate, instead of Mr. Miyagi teaching Daniel how to punch and kick and do leg sweeps, he taught Daniel how to paint fences. He taught Daniel how to catch flies with chopsticks. He taught Daniel how to wax on and wax off. Figured I had some 80s people in here. This teaching Mr. Miyagi was giving Daniel, Daniel did not understand. He thought he was going to be a karate expert, not a handyman. But what Mr. Miyagi was teaching Daniel would prove to be useful. You see, Daniel wanted to fight and attack. Mr. Miyagi wanted to teach Daniel self-control and patience. You see, Mr. Miyagi knew what Daniel didn't learn karate properly, it would have been hurtful. Or rather, it would have, not been helpful. Daniel began to understand what Mr. Miyagi was teaching him, and Daniel became a great karate student. So much so that he entered into the All Valley tournament where he came face to face with his adversary, Johnny. And not only did he face his adversary, Johnny, he also faced Johnny's dojo, which is better known as Cobra Kai. And Daniel defeated each one of them, one by one, to be the very best around and to win the karate tournament. Now, if you don't know what story I'm talking about, this is one of the greatest 80s movies ever by the name of The Karate Kid. But don't miss the point of the story. The point of the story is guidance. It's about how Mr. Miyagi guided Daniel to recover his life. You know, like Daniel, we all need guidance. We all need guidance every single day. Some of them, you know, some of us need guidance on what we should eat. Anyone ever struggle with that? We were just talking about that, right? We should, you know, we struggle with what we eat. And some of us struggle with what we should wear. I don't know if you've noticed, but sometimes I need guidance for that. I've actually had someone say to me, you need to stop dressing like you're in early recovery, and so I started dressing more professionally. Yeah, it was a wake-up call. It wasn't just jeans and t-shirts, you know, I needed to be a little better. So they guided me.
That was not me.
It was not her. It was not her at all. Just to be clear, it was not Michelle. You know, some of us need guidance on whether I should invest my money or should I go on another shopping spree. Hopefully you have a friend that said, no, you need to invest it. You know, guidance is something that we all desire, but guidance is not something that we all have. You know, this morning we're going to be reading out of John 10, where Jesus gives an illustration about guidance. I've decided to name the message, Recovering Our Lives Through Guidance. So John, I want to be clear in the Gospels that John, chapter 10, verse 1 through 5, it's the words of Jesus, and it goes like this. Let me set this before you as plainly as I can. If a person climbs over or through the fence of a sheep pen instead of going through the gate, you know he's up to no good, a sheep rustler. The shepherd walks right up to the gate. The gatekeeper opens the gate to him, and the sheep recognize his voice. He calls his own sheep by name and leads them out. When he gets them all out, he leads them, and they follow because they are familiar with his voice. They won't follow a stranger's voice, but will scatter because they aren't used to the sound of it. So we're reading, Jesus has given an illustration of guidance by talking about shepherd and sheep. Now, let me just explain the obvious. Jesus is the shepherd and we are the sheep. But he's given this illustration, and when he's given the illustration to the people, he's talking in this passage, John 10, the people, they know exactly what Jesus was talking about because shepherds were common in Jesus' culture. But I've said it, if we are the sheep and Jesus is the shepherd. So let me give you some characteristics of sheep to see if we kind of identify with some of the stuff that sheep do, all right? So the first thing that you must understand about sheep is they stink. They have no awareness of their condition. I don't know about you, anybody in here, but sometimes I talk to my friend and she is like, your breath stinks. I'm like, well, how am I supposed to know? I'm the one talking, right? My point is that sheep stink. They have no awareness of their condition. Sheep are dirty. They have no way to clean themselves. Sheep are defenseless. They are prone to attacks. Sheep are stubborn. Hello, anyone, you know, yeah. It's a family trait, right, Mom? Sheep are easily led astray. They're easily distracted. I'm always distracted. Sheep are very dependent. They can't feed themselves. The only guide in life, and their only hope in life, is their shepherd. So let's talk about the shepherd once again. The shepherd in our lives is Jesus. So the shepherd, it's a very lonely profession, right? There was never any job fairs to be a shepherd, no networking events to be a shepherd, and not only that, it was not a position that was sought out. It was regularly given to the least of the family members. If you remember the story of David, they said, that he was the least of the family, but David was a shepherd. So it was always given to the least. But something about shepherds is shepherds are very patient with their sheep. Shepherds are compassionate towards their sheep. Shepherds are always, they know where they are leading and guiding their sheep. Right? Shepherds and sheep have a special communication. You know, special communication leads me to my first point, the title of our message, to recover our lives through guidance. I believe that for us to recover our lives through guidance, we must first intentionally listen. That's just a picture of the sheep pen, and they would have to climb over the gate or the wall to let the sheep to go. All right. So the gatekeeper, you must understand in this passage, he opens the gate for the shepherd. You see there, the gate. And the shepherd walks in. He calls the sheep, intentionally listens for the shepherd's voice. Intentional listening was important because sheep understood their shepherd and shepherd understood their sheep. You might say, all right, well, how does that apply to us? It's because we are not consistent with listening to the voice of Jesus. We're not listening to him. You know, how many of us have ever had a conversation with someone, you're talking to them and you know they're not listening, right? So you test and you say, I was over your house, I spilled grape juice on your couch, it was a bad stain, I couldn't get it out, and you're telling this person all of this, and all of a sudden, like, you hear him say, yeah, and you're like, did you hear what I said? No, repeat that again? That's not listening. That's hearing. That's not intentional listening. Intentional listening involves understanding. Intentional listening involves focus on what is being said. We talk about recovering our lives right. So think about if we could use intentional listening in our relationships. Right? Think about, we say to people who we're in relationships with, it could be a spouse, it could be a friend, it could be a coworker. It's not about what you have to say, you know. It's not about my opinion, but I want to listen to you. What if we ever start intentionally listening during the holidays? Can you imagine Thanksgiving with family and you're intentionally listening to them? You know you always have one relative you can't see eye to eye with, right? We can be honest, it's church, we all have one. What if we start intentionally listening with that relative? Say, you know what, I've been trying to share my pain with you for a long time. How about if I be your servant? How about if I intentionally listen to you? You might be able to recover that relationship. I'm going to try it with my sister. See if I can recover that relationship. Also, what if we ever started intentionally listening in our prayer time? Listen, I know a lot of you guys, I know you guys are prayer warriors. I know you're faithful prayer. I know you go to God a lot and ask him for a lot of things. And if you're like me, I sometimes are like, oh God, please open this door. Please let the Red Sox have an opening day. And I pray these requests, right? But sometimes God checks me. He says, Joy, when are you going to start listening to me? When's the last time we can there's a time where we can just say, you know what, God, I'm done giving you a request. I want to hear from you. Speak to me. I want to intentionally listen to God in prayer. You know, we might be misguided because we have not intentionally listened to the voice of Jesus. Let me give you some practical ways that we can intentionally listen to the voice of Jesus. The first one is by confession. I heard a speech from this guy named Jay. He's one of the leaders of the Vineyard movement. And he said there was a guy that came up to him and he said, hey, Jay, I really would like to hear the voice of Jesus. And Jay said, if you really want to hear the voice of Jesus, ask Jesus what unconfessed sin you have in your life. I guarantee you won't hear the voice of Jesus. Think about this. You know, I talk about our relationships. When we start confessing things, What if we're able to say, I was harsh when I spoke to you. I didn't treat you right when I was frustrated. You start confessing that, and it opens vulnerability. And you'll be able to start repairing and recovering some of your relationships. Not too long ago, I was in the office, and I was acting like a spoiled brat. Intentionally doing whatever I wanted. Not what I was supposed to be doing. I happened to be doing some journaling that night, and I had realized my behavior was out of line. The next morning, I went to my boss, not Michelle, a different boss, and I apologized. I said I should be working with you, not against you. She responded, "Glad you said that. We were going to have a chat about your behavior later." Can you imagine if I had just continued with my behavior and not confessed what I had done? That conversation would have been a lot different, but we were able to recover our relationship. Chocolates and flowers did help. But the confession was the most important part, saying, "I'm sorry. I shouldn't have acted like this." Another way I believe we can start intentionally listening to Jesus is we have to start turning down the volume in our lives. Some of us are distracted by every single noise in life. Let me ask you, what is the most unproductive, unfruitful noise in your life right now?
My TV.
Yep, TV. Is it social media? Is it the news? Is it the internet? We have to start turning down the volume in our lives. I met a pastor once, and I asked her permission to share this analogy I'm going to give. She's really great. She's out in Ohio. But this pastor loves Taylor Swift. I'm personally not a big fan. I'm sorry. Judge me if you want. I'm confessing. But I am not a big fan of Taylor Swift. But I can imagine if you were in a car with this pastor, she loves Taylor Swift. She would have Taylor Swift music on as loud because she would be jamming with it and singing with it. But during some of these songs, she would be trying to communicate something, but we can't hear it because the music is so loud. I believe that's how it is. We have so much noise in our lives, we cannot hear the voice of Jesus. Another way intentionally listen is we have to be grounded in reality. The real you get the closer you get to Jesus. Some of us are going through things, some of us are denying it. I'm not hurt, I'm not bothered by it, I don't even care anymore. And when you do that, it's not living in reality. It's not living with Jesus. Jesus is in reality. He doesn't live in a fantasy world. So we have to start being real with him and with what's going on in our lives. We have to start being real under decisions we make. Jesus can never bless who you are pretending to be. He can only bless who you are. So we have to start being grounded in reality. Another way I believe we can intentionally listen to Jesus, we need to start slowing down. Some of us have long days, we don't slow down, and the reason why we don't slow down is because we have to be here, we have to be there in a hurry. We have to start slowing down. If I saw Jesus, I believe if I saw him, and he would not be in a Tesla on 93 driving 85 miles per hour in the passing lane. Nope. I think he would be driving a 91 Toyota Corolla going slow in the slow lane, waving at us. Jesus goes at a slow pace. We have to start slowing down. One of the best ways to intentionally listen and turning down the volume in our lives is by doing prayer of examine. That's where you say, this is how I am feeling. God, this is how I'm really feeling. I haven't been grounded in reality. I'm walking around with a secret sin in my life, and I need to confess it to you. It's something you can do for 20 minutes. Now, listen, if you don't have any type of devotion life, I highly suggest and encourage you to start. You can do small take 5 minutes, and then the following week take 10 minutes, and then you start to build yourself up. Start to take 15 minutes, and then make a consistent rhythm. So one of the first ways of intentionally listening, one of the second ways that I believe we can recover our lives through guidance is by responding to our names. Look at John 10:3. Again, he calls his sheep by name. So once again, let's give this what happens to Jesus' culture. Shepherds entered into the sheep pen, and he calls each of his sheep by name. And guess what? The sheep come running out to their name, because they know the shepherd's voice when they hear their names. They know their purpose is to follow the shepherd. Like with us, when we hear our shepherd, Jesus, call our names, we should know our purpose. I gave you that story on the Karate Kid, and I'm talking about the 1986 film, and in that movie, Daniel was called a lot of names. He was called a punk. He was called a scumbag. He was called a coward. Daniel was called these names. He reacted unfavorably. But when Daniel found his focus, Mr. Miyagi called him Danielson. And when he called him Danielson, he reacted differently. He reacted, I know who I am. Likewise, it is with us. I don't know about you guys, but when I hear my full name being called, I know some of you know me as Miss Joy, Joyous, Joybell, in certain places. But when I hear somebody call me Joylyn Moody, I say, yeah, that's me. I know who I am, and I know my purpose. Something about hearing your name, Jesus is our shepherd, and he calls us by name. There are thieves and robbers that are always trying to steal us away from God. The devil and other demonic spirits are trying to call names over you that Jesus has never called you. They may call you by the name of shame. The thief and robber may call you by the name of secrecy. So whatever you did, you don't have to confess to nobody. Keep it a secret. And a problem with that is when you keep something in the dark, the more you keep it in the dark, the more power it gets. So the enemy may speak secrecy over you. They speak the name of isolation over you. They speak the name of fear over you. They may speak the name of condemnation, the name of failure over you. He may speak the name unlovable over you. But our good shepherd, Jesus, does not call you by those names. He doesn't call you by the name of fearful. He calls you by the name of courageous. He does not call you by the name of condemned. He calls you by the name of forgiven. He doesn't call you by the name of failure. He calls you by the name of overcomer. He does not call you by the name of unlovable. He calls you by the name of love. We need to make sure that we make it more personal, right? John 3:16. We need to make it personal. For God so loved me that he gave his only begotten Son. And when I believe on him, I shall not perish, but I shall have everlasting life. We have to make it more personal. When you are feeling unlovable, you need to say to God this verse and make it more personal, right? When you're feeling unlovable, know that for God so loved me. When I'm feeling unlovable, that he gave me his only begotten Son. We need to make it personal. You are not unlovable. You are lovable. God doesn't look at you with regret. He looks at you with awe and wonder. He covers our lives. We have to start responding to the names that Jesus, our shepherd, has called us. So my first point is to recover our lives through guidance and intentional listening. My second point is must respond to our names. My last point is to recover our lives through guidance. We have to follow him. Plain and simple. We have to follow him. Look at John 10:4. It goes like this and says, when he has brought out his own and he goes ahead of them, his sheep follow him because they know his voice. The sheep follow the shepherd because the shepherd will lead them in green pastures. The shepherd will lead them in green pastures. The sheep follow the shepherd because they know that he will lead them to quiet waters. That sheep follow the shepherd because they know that the shepherd will, and they don't want to go on the because they know that the shepherd won't lead them down the wrong path. They will lead him to the right path for his name's sake. Why should I follow Jesus? The reason why we should follow Jesus because he's the shepherd of our lives is because he knows how to live life. There's not a prophet, there's not a man, there's never a priest that has ever lived the life that Jesus has lived. Think about that. Like this, not only did Jesus leave a path to follow where he lived, he left a path to follow after he died. You want to know how to love? Follow Jesus. You want to know how to forgive? Follow Jesus. You want to know how to be patient in hard times, to be joyous in hard times? Follow Jesus. You know, we need guidance and help because like sheep, we have all gone astray. Like sheep, we all stink. Like sheep, we can't defend ourselves. Like sheep, we can't clean ourselves. We need guidance and help. And we can recover our lives with guidance. So, intentional listening.